Hello and welcome to another video battle report from Tabletop Simulator. This time it's my Medieval Hungarian army playing Dave with his Medieval Spanish. As you can see, it's a fairly open table. I've swept quite a lot of the terrain off the table because I'm hoping my Hungarian army is a bit faster moving and has less medium rough terrain troops than Dave's. Here's the list. Here's me having a quick look at the list. Fairly straightforward list in some ways. There's a heavy infantry command that's really there as a big blocker. You've got a tiny command with 3 knights that sort of bolts on and supports the other 2. And then the brilliant general sat on the far end. This is the interesting command. It's got a decent knight strike force, it's got a bit of cavalry to support it, and it's got that unusual war wagon really to block off a flank. So hopefully to try and make the game a little bit smaller. And here they go onto table, starting with, of course, the tiny knight command. Dropping that on the table does nothing, doesn't really tell anybody or tell my opponent really what's coming. They sit up there fairly centrally. Dave's already thrown one command out over on my right, and that's a medium foot command. It's got almugavars, it's got some crossbowmen, and here comes the wall of high quality Spanish knights sat the other side of that rather tricky hill in the middle of his deployment area. So he's just lining up some knights there, and here comes the infantry and spearmen command. It's that supported spear, it's their armoured spear. It's a good solid block, it's kind of tough. If it can coordinate with the knights, it's quite a good anvil. The bowmen might sneak off a few shots as well if they're lucky, do a little bit of damage to the enemy, but in some ways they're there as kind of a squishy, tempting target. I think at the moment what you're watching is I'd obviously not glued on all the figures onto the base, so I'm having to do a bit of reorganising there. Dave has snuck his final command in while I've been doing that reorganisation, which is a couple more knights, a couple more medium infantry hiding behind the hill. So he's really fully stacked up with medium knights on my left, his right. So the rest of my knight command's got one place to go. The army ends up actually being quite narrow with the war wagon there. Another big block of high quality knights. So off we go. First dice roll, me moving first, pushing up that interesting little formation of medium cavalry bowmen, a couple of elite light horse. That's still quite decent about whatever's likely to sneak out on that flank. And then that big 2 solid blocks of knights and the rest of it. Now here's the difficult bit. What do I do here? Because suddenly there isn't really enough space. So what I've done, I've sent the light horse over to try and pin his medium foot back. Here I'm actually splitting my knights in this command. He's got a brilliant general, so he can do quite a lot. And once those guys are sort of falling back, there's not much they're going to have to do. So the knights are swinging all the way behind that small knight command in the centre, and fairly obviously then I think from that the spearmen will ideally drift left. Those knights will fit into the gap in between, and then I'll end up with a wall of sort of 5 or 6 knights and the spearmen, which will take on Dave's knights to the left of that hill and hopefully have overlaps either side. So here's the kind of tricky bit about how do we actually make this happen. Well, Dave's knights are coming forwards as well, unsurprisingly, stomping forwards, bringing their light infantry screen with them. They can see the numbers of my knights coming up, I suspect, and want to kind of mass quite quickly. Interestingly, he breaks off a couple of knights as well, with very little on the light horse and cavalry front. His light horse are probably not good enough to do that, which sort of gives a target for my spearmen to act as an anvil. And his day's reserve of knights, and some sort of bowmen and almugavars. So again, he's stacking up. We're looking at that we're going to have a real knight versus knight fest over here. It's going to be a lot of heavy metal slamming into each other. There's in quite an enclosed space, one of those battles where both sides have decided that they want to do the same thing. They both think that the game is winnable in the same area. So starting again, looking at what's going on here. What are the dice? Which commands are moving first? So how many pips have I got here? Well, I think the idea straight away is to look at, can I actually put pressure on those knights and sort of force them to engage with probably some of those spearmen, because the spearmen, I'm quite happy for 2 of his knights to stick into those spearmen. It's not the end of the world should they do so, because the spearmen are pretty resilient. They should survive the first impact, and it soaks up 2 of the knights and makes my knight on knight combat in the middle slightly more uneven and uneven in my favour, which is all the best way to do it. So that command on the left pushes up. Here we start doing very kind of complicated, tricky stuff. Is this going to be possible? There's a bit of a slide, bit of a move, trying to stay about 4 MU away so I can do multiple moves. And then that thing where you're trying to work out in an I go, you go system, have I got enough turns to reassemble and put back together this kind of combination of troops before the two lines actually slam into combat. Now those two lines look far enough apart, it doesn't see that Dave's going to be able to get his knights into mine, and I'm wider than him already. We're trying to ping off a couple of shots, just see if there's any luck there. Not a great deal is going to happen though. It's only one bowman against an armoured knight, so that is a bit tricky. Here there's actually a big block. The shooters, the crossbowmen, I think there are in this formation of Dave's medium foot. This is, for me, is clearly a holding command, but against a lot of shooters, they can obviously put out a lot of shooting, and that can be quite dangerous to light horse. The war wagon's not so fussed, but the light horse could get blown away by this. So here come the bowmen. They're manoeuvring quite carefully. Now, as you see, I've got one knight over there that has the potential to cause a lot of trouble for those medium foot formations. A knight, in theory, could just go through one of those bases at impact straight away, take them straight out and start munching up the line, which would free up the rest of it. So what's Dave doing over here? He's kind of, oh, it looks like it's me actually. He has charged through with the knights. He's just put them into a gap, and all my light horse and cavalry have evaded away. Not too fussed about that. We can come back. It potentially even opens up the flank of the knights for those spearmen. Looks like the knights have rolled along. They might even be impetuous knights, and here comes his protective screen through again of light horse. See if they can do a bit, keep my cavalry away, I guess. But still, it looks like an opportunity for the spearmen. I can potentially even split that spearman block now. This other knight group, can't quite do it. Sits there. What's it going to do? It probably needs these other guys to come up first and form itself into a more coherent line. It can't really afford to advance forwards at this point in time. And all of a sudden, there's quite a lot for Dave to be doing in the middle there, with those reserve bowmen as well. So are these knights going to be able to shuffle around? They're doing a bit of moving, bit of sliding, just trying to reassemble that line that steep hill just really stopped them doing. And in the centre, a few more infantry come pushing forwards, the medium foot just straight over the top of that hill into a bit of a gap. But I'm looking at that gap thinking, this game could be over before anybody really has a chance to exploit these flanks, because it's going to be a big kind of smash of the cavalry and smash of the mounted arms in the middle there. So here we are, trying to do this kind of reorganisation. So first of all, those knights push up and sit there very carefully. That allows the bowmen to hopefully get out of the way at some point. And yes, there was an opportunity for a flank charge. The supported spearmen go in for a flank charge and have sort of now, with an extra silhouette as well in there, have suddenly got a real opportunity to do some serious damage to those couple of knights on the end of it, which actually at the same time sort of traps those light horse as well. So here come the other spearman block, moves up. I'm hoping that those spearmen in the flank have got that dealt with, and there we've just tidied up, and suddenly that battle line is fully assembled, and there's even sort of a spare bowman floating around at the back to hopefully patch this up. On the other side, all I'm really doing here is just shoving stuff forwards to delay those 4 or 5 units from actually getting anywhere serious. I'm quite happy if the war wagon takes a while, but the shooting's actually taken out one of my light horse with a couple of shots. That's unfortunate. 2 light horse can possibly do something. 1 light horse just feels like a bit of a target, especially when there's 2 bowmen over there. So here we go, and look at that. We've gone into the flank of a knight with spearmen, with support, and we've been outdiced, and we've taken a hit, which isn't really what you want to do. But still, it means that knight's stuck. It means that group's broken up. It's not necessarily the end of the world. And really, this is all about trying to tempt those knights into a charge in which they end up, overlapped at both ends of the line against my, hopefully better quality troops. So this is a real, who's going to blink first, who's going to go first, what's going to happen with these 2 lines of troops. But the longer this goes on, the more opportunity even those spearmen have to to push around the flanks of these knights. So Dave's not gone in this time. He still needs to build up that second line, but as you can see, there's more width there. The question is, which way will these two groups align when they smash into each other? What will happen there? And now that knight is actually there as well.
This means war.
So let's take a quick break here and have a look at Dave's list. Probably should have looked at it earlier, but forgot. So starting with the first command, you've actually got really just a knighty command there. It's 5 knights, 4 elite. That doesn't really get much better than that. It's impetuous, competent general to keep hold of them, and quite a pokey light cavalry force. 3 light cavalry with javelins, so they're up at impact. All of them elite. That's definitely going to bully anybody else's light horse, really. The normal 2 light horse with bow isn't really going to stand up much against that. The second corps, a couple of spearmen, mediocre. They're not great, but that's a lot of hit points. That's 8 hit points between them. Luxury javelin gives them a bit of cover. 2 crossbowmen, one of Dave's specials. He really does like 2 shooters together. And an Almugavar. It's unusual to see them in ones, but I guess, you know, all of these commands work with the other ones. That's the way this thing sort of seems to fit together. So you can put out quite a bit of shooting, can keep cavalry away from those spearmen. The Almugavar can do some stuff as well, make himself a bit dangerous. And then this third one, pretty much the same as the second command, but it does have 2 military order knights in as well, 2 heavy knight impacts. So that pushes it up to 7 in the whole army, of which 6 are elite, and these 2 are impact. They're not impetuous, so they're easy to control. You've got a brilliant general here as well. So he's moving these 2, possibly even 3 groups around. So, you know, you're looking at the Almugavar could go join the other Almugavar. The 2 crossbowmen work on their own. A javelinman is just a good rough terrain troops, and those 2 knights can go join t'other ones as well. So it's an interesting army. It looks a bit bitty, but what you've got to do is, I think, look at all of these commands and say, none of these actually ever operate on their own. They always operate in conjunction with one of the others, and they can do a very good job of dominating any rough terrain, which is always kind of rare in a medieval period. So that's the list that you're seeing across the table in this battle. Kind of interesting, and let's get back to the battle.
This means war.
So enough of that, let's get back to the battle. So over here on this right hand side, Dave's now messing around with these archers. I guess these medium foot, they do have a lot of movement, a lot of flexibility, and having knocked off one of my light horse, suddenly this does look like quite an open flank for them, particularly as those mediocre spearmen have now blocked off the knight, who's kind of forced to probably going to be forced to charge them. So in the middle, there's clearly a knight on knight combat lining up. Now here, I'm still feeling pretty good about this. I've got my troops all lined up. I've got the extra width. These mediums who are coming in to try and support. I've got a lancer cavalry coming over from the right hand flank to cover off that wing, and I've definitely got more width with the spearmen on the other side as well. So as you can see there from that top down view, you know, really there's probably a couple of overlaps in there. The fly in the ointment is the failure of those spearmen to overwhelm the knights on my left hand side. So here we go, still trying to faff around and see what we can do here. And with these cavalry who've run away, they're going to need to come back at some point as well. So that combat is still grinding on. The spearmen have still managed to fail to push back the knights. These knights are just hanging on to each other. Are they going in? Yep. Are they thinking about it? What are they going to do? Yep. So they go in. What I'm trying to do here is push that ordinary knight out of the line and get all the elite ones in. So normally you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't let 2 knights go in and push the other one back out of the way as they can form. But for me, you know, it does put a knight behind 2 others. So if they were to explode, that would be kind of risky. But you know, they're elite knights. They're in. They've got 1 overlap. It's not too bad, and it gives me a reserve somewhere as well. And as you can see there with that measuring stick, the medium cavalry, I think it might be medium or heavy cavalry lancer, is still threatening those bowmen, but staying just about out of range. Now, there's a lot of medium foot coming there. There's a lot of shooting power, but I'm hoping to punch through and beat the knights, because once numbers have paid on those enemy knights, the rest of the army suddenly does look very, very squishy. And I'm thinking I can probably afford to lose a couple of units, those medium cavalry, the light cavalry, the war wagon, anyway, and it won't be too bad. So again, just staying slightly out of range of the bowmen with those cavalry moving. Then here's a chance to try and push those light horse up, see if I can actually catch some of them, get hold of some of them on that flank as well. There could be a couple of points there, but really this is all about taking on kind of their best troops in the middle and doing so with 2 overlaps and trying to finish and blunt their cutting edge and give them a lot of problems, particularly with 2 of the knights already pinned over on that left hand side and engaging that spearman and potentially being squashed by my cavalry as well at some point in future. So buying time, trading space for time, and really doing that slightly daft thing of trying to beat the enemy's best troops and leave them wrecked as a result of that. So as the game kind of moves on, obviously Dave's over there looking at his dice at the moment. He's built up quite a substantial flank attack on my right hand flank to come in, but now I've built this line, even though it's got bowmen in the middle of it as an overlap, it's still a little bit tricky. So what's he going to do? He's racing forwards there, or possibly not, having second thoughts on that one. Obviously I've given him a bit more of a problem than maybe he had thought over there. So what is he actually going to do here? Picking up quite a lot of command points with this one. Must be a good roll somewhere. That's probably too many options, really, isn't it? And actually, I think there's a time at which it's just weight of numbers works. Just throw loads of troops into that space over on my right hand flank. They will be able to do something, and certainly the fact that I'm there with possibly medium or heavy cavalry does make it quite a big target for those crossbowmen. Rushing back up here, I've had to engage those mediocre spearmen. They're taking a couple of hits, but those knights with the armor, with the better quality, they should do okay, but it's going to take them a long time to get through those spearmen. And suddenly the general with that command is now busy doing things with knights in the middle. And here we go into that first round of combat, the big knight on knight combat. And as you can see, I'm picking up markers. I'm coming off much the worse in what should be combat in which my elites kind of outnumber his, and my overlaps do well as well. So this isn't really the outcome that you want when you're trying to bring on a decisive clash of the 2 great lines. As you can see, I've done just the 1 hit on the overlap knight. I picked up 2 yellow hit markers there, which is pretty tragic. It's now my turn. What do I do to try and get hold of these light horse and try and finish off these couple of knights on the flank? I've charged them, but I've forgotten they can turn and evade and go through those knights and squirt away. So look, back to the game after that brief interlude. This is suddenly starting to look sticky. My theory of overwhelming, punching through the middle, doing some quite damage, really has come badly unstuck, particularly with it's looking like double trouble, to be honest, with those bowmen coming in from my flank and 2 yellow markers right in the middle, especially with my knight behind it who thought he was safe. So with that in mind, this is getting a bit desperate. So I end up doing something quite desperate, throwing my cavalry and the light horse lancer into a couple of these units of crossbowmen to see if I can get lucky, punch a hole through them as well. And clearly that doesn't work. The cavalry get utterly wiped out in the first round of combat. There's a bit of a breakthrough there. I do push somebody in the end, but look at that. That's a hole punched in the middle of my line. It's an extra bit of damage on the guy behind it. I picked up yet another yellow marker on someone who had an overlap in their favour as well. So Dave's knights are just proving invulnerable in this in what should be a fairly equal combat there between 2 different sets of people. It's just getting very tricky. So game's going on. Suddenly my knights are starting to evaporate in great numbers in the middle here. And yet again, still on that flank, they're still, all the spearmen, the overlaps, the cavalry are still grinding away against that one knight. He's thinking about going in, but he's in 2 minds about it. The Spanish, they're suddenly pushing through the middle. They've seen a few more squishy targets to go in behind. That second light horse comes up to provide an overlap now that the one who's pushed forward is actually in combat. And all of a sudden, there's possibilities here. My attempt to hang on to this flank, that's evaporated. I've suddenly got a very, very vulnerable bowman, and there he is, proving to be very vulnerable again. Suddenly he's in range of these really, really quite fast medium infantry. You know, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 medium infantry in this army of Dave's, which gives them a lot of troops who can all move quite a long way across the table pretty quickly. And as you can see, some of them are actually even trying to work out where to go with none of the knights dying, apparently, or just the one. There are very few gaps from actually to go into at all. So that one knight who's still engaged charges down the table, drives off a couple of my light horse. My heavy knight is still grinding in, not really done much damage to those poor quality spearmen. And here Dave is just pummeling and pummeling away at my knights, with what suddenly, if you do the maths now, looks like he's got superior numbers, and he's starting to roll them up from the right with that attack of the bowmen and with the Almugavars. How long can these guys last in the middle? We're not quite sure. They're starting with injury. This is starting to feel like the point at which you might throw generals in, but actually it looks like the point at which I'm taking a few more figures off the table. So my sweeping plan to kind of push them down on the left and drive them back, hammer them into the anvil of the spearmen, that's not really worked out because they've just stuck onto that anvil. And using the spearman to soak up some of his knights sort of has worked, but giving myself that advantage of numbers in an almost inevitable knight on knight combat, which is how a lot of these medieval battles always end up. Looking at this in retrospect, I've just got a few holes, but now really pushing knights out of overlap, trying to hit something squishy there. The sort of game moves I'm looking at now are really much more along the lines of, can I rack up some points to make the defeat a little bit more palatable, rather than thinking, is this actually a savable game? Because my knight force is pretty battered there, and the rest of my troops are about to be slammed by those medium foot who started in that rough terrain the other side of the hill, have come forwards. My screening force, the wagon is clearly now in the wrong place. It would have been a much better being kind of tighter into the middle, so that it was something that Dave's troops were forced to fight and spend a few turns getting through, but instead it's gone too wide. They've not really had to do anything about it. They've not had to confront it, which is an error on my front, definitely an error on my part. And again, another base comes off there. The light horse lancers have not done well. Great small victory, run over some of the crossbowmen and the Almugavars there, but here are my knights just collapsing quite quickly, or well, it seems quite quickly. It's been going on for most of the game, really.
This means war.
And that was the point we called it, really. There was with the knights gone, there wasn't really much hope left for the Hungarians to overwhelm a still pretty cutting edge intact, if you like, Spanish force. I think it was an interesting game. It just does go to show a couple of things, really: how tough or how much of a lottery it is if you're placing elite knights against elite knights. It's still hard for them to go down quickly, and I think in retrospect a lot of my plan was around using a couple of overlaps to overwhelm some fully armoured elite high quality troops with generals quickly, and that didn't happen. I guess that's no surprise, really. I failed to force Dave to take on or soak up some knights in the spearmen. I think I was kind of unlucky on the flank, and I think a little bit unlucky in the middle, but ultimately I think it did come down to that big mass of medium infantry. My Hungarian army just wasn't left with enough stuff to deal with that many shooters and the Almugavars and a couple of spearmen as well. And looking at some of these troops here, possibly the army should have had some more of the Szekler's, the bow cavalry, but that cuts away or eats away at the knights. And it was an experiment in using a fairly big block of the spearmen, but again that didn't work particularly well. Really, as I said earlier, I was unable to force Dave onto it. So look, another interesting game, another good run out for Tabletop Simulator, and hope you enjoyed it, and see you for the next one.